Of the many weapons in Fallout, only one allows you to carry a portable Armageddon in your back pocket. There's only one weapon that can be described as a tactical nuclear catapult. Can you beat Fallout 4 with only a fat man? Unlike Fallout 3 or New Vegas, Fallout 4 takes a more simplistic approach to weapons by doing away with strength requirements. This means that I could put no points into strength or 10 points into strength, and it wouldn't affect my ability to use the Fat Man in any way. Well, that's not entirely true. It won't affect my ability to fire mini nukes from the Fat Man. What strength does do is affect how much damage I can deal when whacking someone with the Fat Man. Because also, unlike previous Fallout games, there are two ways to damage an enemy with any given firearm. There's the obvious shooting part and the gun bashing part. Strength dictates how much damage can be dealt with gun bashing. You might think that gun bashing sort of takes away from the point of the video, but I'm inclined to disagree. Whether it's beating a puppy to death with a Fat Man or setting off a miniature nuclear warhead in a crowd of people, both are doing damage with the Fat Man, which is the challenge. With all of that out of the way, I put 6 points into strength, charisma, and intelligence, 4 points into luck, and 2 into perception, endurance, and agility. I tried to come up with some creative name for my character, failed miserably, named myself Fat, just Fat, ran out of breath on my way to the vault, entered it, froze, defrosted, and escaped the vault without killing any of the radroaches by trapping them behind doors. Also, before the bombs fell and destroyed everything, I used console commands for the first and last time in this run to see if you can kill baby Sean. You can't if you were as morbidly curious as I was. Out into the wasteland, I stopped by Sanctuary to pick up a fan from my dead neighbor's house and let Codsworth fix me a snack. And holy god, is he fucking slow. He then gave me a message my significant other had recorded some 200 years ago. I had no interest in listening to it, but I didn't want to disrespect the dead by throwing it away, so I stuck it in the fridge for safekeeping. After leaving Sanctuary, the immediate problem was that I can only attack enemies with a Fat Man, and I don't have a Fat Man. There are quite a few of them spread across the Commonwealth, and their locations are listed on the Fallout Wiki, but because it's such a stupid powerful weapon, it's not exactly easy to get. You won't find one just sitting out in the open in a convenient place. For example, there's one in Good Neighbor that's just asking to be stolen, but getting to Good Neighbor at a very low level with limited supplies is not the easiest thing in the world. I had a rock-solid idea of where I was going to go to get one. The plan is idiot-proof. Not even I could fuck it up. It started at the Museum of Freedom with Preston Garvey killing the raiders outside so I could complete the out-of-time quest to level up. Then, indirectly threatening great bodily harm to Wolfgang if he didn't pay me and fuck off. I made my way to Lexington, just past the Super Duper Mart, to an encampment of raiders who were hiding out amongst a few partially destroyed buildings. One of them, presumably the Big Cheese, had power armor and a Fat Man. All the wiki says about the Fat Man found here is on the walkway where the raider with power armor is found. I, being the reasonably reasonable person that I am, took that to mean that the Fat Man is just sitting there. And it was, probably, maybe. What I hadn't considered is that one of the raiders would get to it before I would and decide to kill us all. After trying to lure a few ghouls up there to kill everyone, the raider eventually lost the Fat Man. My hope was that it fell to the ground, but it was nowhere to be found. So that foolproof plan didn't work out all that well. Luckily for me, there's another option that relies on other people doing the hard work for me. I pressed onward, deeper into the city, until I heard a distress call from Cambridge Police Station. Knowing that a hero needed to save the day, I ambushed the Brotherhood soldiers with a dozen ghouls. They got the best of Paladin Dance a few times. After a while and some solid teamwork, we beat the ghouls back into the ground. My mustache and I agreed to help Dance retrieve a deep-range transmitter from Arc Jet Systems. I looted the police station, spent about 90 seconds staring at a loading screen, which happened a few times throughout this run, and Dance and I were off on an adventure. Along the way, he brutally murdered a family of puppies. I tried to block the violence by hiding behind this lamppost, but it didn't really work. Dance and I pushed through ArcJet, and by Dance and I pushed through ArcJet, I mean I used Dance's body as a shield while he killed everything in our path. I tried to be useful by shutting down a few turrets, but it was almost as if I'd shut down Dance when I shut down the turrets. I can't imagine why that would have happened. I cooked Dance alive, did some parkour, and finally found the fattest of men. The new problem is that, Despite everything I said at the beginning of the video about gun bashing, I didn't go into this playthrough thinking that I would use it. I had hoped to rely on mini nukes. But the thing about mini nukes is that, for whatever reason, they're exceedingly rare in Fallout 4. Unlike Fallout 3, where not only can you buy a mini nuke from a vendor in one of the game's biggest cities, you're practically given the Fat Man and 8 mini nukes if you follow the main quest line. In Fallout 4, well, that doesn't happen. You're never given any mini nukes, and they're a bitch to find, primarily because no vendors sell them. That's right, you cannot buy mini nukes in Fallout 4. If you don't have subtitles enabled, you miss that asterisk after cannot. You can buy them, but only from a weapon emporium that you create at a settlement, and to do that, you need local leader rank 2 and cap collector rank 2, and the lowest level at which you can obtain both perks is level 20. Spoiler alert, when I saw the endgame cutscene, I was level 19. So, you know, weapon emporium ain't an option. We'll come back to that problem in a bit. I've already been bitching for like 15% of this video. After I found what Dan's had been looking for, we left ArcJet. I agreed to join the Brotherhood of Steel and was off to Bunker Hill. On my travels, I realized that I didn't care at all about the junk jet. I tried to stuff it into a fridge like I did with that holotape from earlier, but you can probably guess how that turned out. I then discovered BADTFL Regional Office, and guess what treasures lay inside? Mini nuke. What I'd been searching for so long was finally within my grasp. All I had to do was run inside, snag the nuke from the evidence locker, and run like hell. Things didn't really go as planned, because why would they? I ended up spending about 8 minutes in that nightmare of a building, because I couldn't find the goddamn evidence locker. Eventually I did, after wasting far more stim packs than I was comfortable doing, left the building with a single mini nuke, and was back in the game. I arrived at Bunker Hill to sell some stuff, but also because there are mini nukes in the basement. I thought it would be like stealing candy from parents who are mourning the death of their first child. But just like the cure for Johnny's stage 4 colon cancer, the utility basement is inaccessible. Let me tell you, this hit me just as hard as the cancer hit Johnny. God bless him, he fought as hard as he could, but he always was a little bitch. Anyway, after that disappointment, I went to where another mini nuke was assured, Cabot House. Yes, after smooth talking my way into Jack Cabot's family home, I went down to the basement, threw Edward's mini nuke down the stairs just to see what happened, stole it, and upped my arsenal to a whopping 2 mini nukes. I had also read that that particular mini nuke respawns after a while, so I waited quite a while, left the building, reloaded the game, and did not pick up a third mini nuke because it didn't respawn. I went to Good Neighbor to sell what I'd picked up on my travels, because what else could I do? Acquired my third mini nuke by stealing it from Cleo, marked Diamond City on my map, returned to the police station to continue the Brotherhood questline a bit, made it to Diamond City, and was one doorknob away from a fourth mini nuke. The lock on Arturo's house was as formidable opponent as I've ever faced in any video game, meaning I, again, didn't get another mini nuke. This is what I meant when I said they're a bitch to get. I wasn't gonna let that defeat me. I'm gonna get a fourth mini nuke or fucking die trying. The target is the combat zone, a place filled with lots of enemies and lots of disappointment from what could have been. Tucked away neatly in the stands is a lonely mini nuke. I saved it from itself by condemning it to certain doom sometime in the future. Outside the combat zone, I got overwhelmed by all the gunfire and prematurely ejected a mini nuke into the crowd of people. It's nothing to be ashamed of, it happens to a lot of guys, or so I've heard. After realizing I just wasted 25% of my ammo, I reloaded a prior save, ignored the raiders, fled the scene, and was off to rescue Nick Valentine. It was in Park Street Station that I finally decided to start gun bashing enemies with the Fat Man, because this not attacking unless I'm detonating a miniature nuclear warhead thing just ain't working out. And this isn't the without attacking anything run. So I dumped a point into Basher to make gun bashing do 25% more damage, and went to town bashing a few men in the confined underground space, where nobody on the surface could hear any screaming. Turns out that even with strength of somewhere around 8, the first rank of gun basher and a dose of psycho, gun bashing isn't all that effective. There's a brief window of time in between gun bashes, and each bash takes somewhere around 15% of your action points. But at least I'm doing damage. In classic Bethesda fashion, after I used a terminal, I failed to use the stairs and the game temporarily broke. Thanks, Todd! The triggermen deeper into the station were about as troublesome to deal with as I thought they'd be. Had I planned ahead and gone in with more than half a dozen stim packs, this might not have been so bad. I then used one of my precious explosive babies on what I thought would be several triggermen, but ended up being like 2. Before pressing onward, I exited through the secret tunnel, returned to Diamond City to buy as many stim packs as I could, then went back to the Museum of Freedom to parkour my way from the roof of the church and onto the museum itself to get a suit of power armor, and went back down to Park Street Station. In addition to making me tougher, the power armor also makes using the Pip-Boy to enter vaults a thing of the past. As I got closer to Nick, I accidentally landed on a triggerman and killed him. My fat ass crushing whoever it lands on is unfortunately not a fat man, which meant I had to do that little segment over again. Dino took a bit of time to kill. Nick didn't glitch out or do anything stupid that would cause our escape to be any more challenging than it was already going to be. Some triggermen could go down in 2 whacks, others took closer to 5 or 6. Skinny Malone gave Nick and I 10 seconds to get out of the vault before he came after us. I agreed to meet Nick in Diamond City, did the interview with Piper, explained the predicament with my boy to Nick, got the key to Kellogg's house from Mayor McDouchebag, met Dogmeat again, got an amazing slow motion shot of Dogmeat being fucked to death by a nuclear warhead, and was off to Fort Hagen. I did follow Dogmeat for a little while, but I always hate to slowly dwaddle behind someone while they do something quest in Fallout. So I set off on my own because I'd picked up a scent. Another mini-nuke was calling out for help. This one was at the Coast Guard pier guarded by super mutants, with the primary threat being a super mutant suicider. Those mutants in particular bothered me. If you kill a suicider, you can get a mini-nuke, but the only way I can kill one is from a distance with a mini-nuke. It's like some sick fuck's idea of a joke. Todd Howard is probably behind this. Another mini-nuke is located in Vault 81. My initial idea was to obliterate the folks sitting at the vault's entrance, but wouldn't you know it, I sent a nuke flying into the group of people and only one of them died. I'm not joking for the sake of the video, that's really fucking lame. The number of NPCs that can't die takes a lot out of Fallout 4. The mini-nuke, located in Vault 81, is supposedly located in a hidden portion of the vault. It was either hidden exceptionally well, or it was referring to the portion of the vault that you can only enter once you start the quest line that ends with you finding Curie. Regardless, I didn't have time for that, so I left the vault, arrived at Fort Hagen, gave Dogmeat a few violent boops on his snoot to make sure he knew he wasn't welcomed here, and entered Fort Hagen to find Kellogg. I took the fight to one of the synths on the top level, but they take 4 to 5 hits each to kill, and with the number of synths in the fort, it would drain through too many of my stim packs to stop and kill them all, not to mention the fact that each gun bash drains a bit of the fusion core, and I was on my last one. I ignored as many of the synths as I could, found Kellogg, used one of my mini-nukes to take him out, bashed the shit out of the synths that didn't die in the blast, and left Fort Hagen. The Brotherhood arrived in the Commonwealth. I talked to Nick and Piper about what to do next, fast-traveled to Good Neighbor to meet Dr. Amari, and let her begin poking and prodding at the Tin Man's brain. It didn't work. I went into Kellogg's memories, all the usual stuff. I think someone stuffed cheese in the VCR tape slot or something, because the last memory kept looping. Or maybe it always does. I don't know. I don't remember the last time I spent any longer in Kellogg's head than was necessary. Out of his head, I was tasked with finding Virgil out in the glowing sea. I ditched my power armor before I even got close to the edge of the glowing sea, because I only had about 1.5 fusion cores left, and I didn't want to waste them running to the end of the game world. Plus, I had a hazmat suit, and would be avoiding enemies whenever possible, so the protection from the power armor wasn't all that useful. A problem that was 1 part Deathclaw and 1 part Carrot led to me temporarily getting stranded on top of a collapsed piece of highway while I waited for a Deathclaw to Amscray. Sometime later, I found Virgil, convinced him to help me, and was off to kill a courser. I kept the tradition alive by completely ignoring the radio signals portion of this quest and going straight for Green Tech Genetics, where I spent another 90 seconds staring at a loading screen. For some reason, I left Green Tech Genetics and fast traveled to the Museum of Freedom, killed the raiders inside, saved Preston and the Minutemen, released a Deathclaw outside, and waited while the Deathclaw, raiders, and Brotherhood soldiers fought to the death until only the Brotherhood remained. Preston and his stupid friends were off to Sanctuary, and I was hot on their trail so that I could use a workbench there to drop off my junk for the first time so far in this playthrough. With some breathing room in my pockets, I returned to Green Tech Genetics to begin scaling the interior of the building, which was surprisingly tougher than Fort Hagen. I used the same technique on the Courser as I did with Kellogg. Kill him. With his Pringle in my possession, Dr. Amari informed me that I'd need the railroad's help to decode the damn thing. I discovered the Old North Church, but before going inside, I took a ride up to the Pridwin with Paladin Dance to keep things moving in the right direction. Maxon gave his speech. I resurrected Dolph Ziggler's old gimmick of introducing myself to everyone I could find, spoke to Maxon again, and tried in vain to get the mini-nuke that was on the table behind Proctor Tegan. It was just sitting there, mocking me, taunting me, trying to seduce me from afar. Also, this weirdo stood there listening to my conversation with Tegan. My first, somewhat official Brotherhood mission was a tough one: clear out Fort Strong. Even with Psycho, a plain super mutant can take 6 bashes to kill, and those of you good at math will know that 6 bashes at roughly 15% AP cost per bash is almost 100% of my AP. That's annoying with a few enemies, but it's a legit problem when there's half a dozen enemies and a super mutant behemoth. There were no options with the super mutant behemoth. A mini nuke was the only way to go. My best bet was to take out as many of the other mutants as I could when I killed the behemoth. I could have done a better job with that, but it worked out alright in the end. There are a few mini nukes in the basement of Fort Strong, which made me more comfortable with using another one in the basement, but I still conserved ammo when at all possible. Back aboard the Pridwin, Maxon spread his creamy praise all over my face, and I returned to the Old North Church to make contact with the railroad. Unfortunately, you can't just analyze the courser chip yourself, and using Tom's terminal will make everyone else hostile. So I handed over the chip, got it analyzed, got the plans from Virgil, and informed Maxon of what was happening. I worked with Ingram to get the teleporter set up properly and teleported inside the Institute. I had no interest in helping the Institute with anything, so I spoke to Madison Lee to convince her to join the Brotherhood, met with the other bigwigs, and left to give Ingram the holotape she'd requested and to inform Elder Maxon of what I discovered. What came next was almost as bad as the Dwemer ruins of Skyrim. I had to talk to Ingram, then back to Madison Lee, and then back to Proctor Ingram. It wouldn't be so bad if there weren't so many loading screens between locations. But then again, it wouldn't be a Bethesda game if there weren't a traumatizing amount of loading screens. After all that waiting, I was tasked with finding a special magnet that Elder Maxon wanted to put on his fridge. Then I fucked up, big time. By this point, I put away the list of mini-nuke locations, which was a mistake, because I passed through Big John Stud's salvage without picking up the mini-nuke located there. I was so focused on finding that magnet that I didn't even think to look for a mini-nuke in the scrapyard. I found the high-powered magnet in Mass Bay Medical Center, returned to the airport, and built not 4, but 5 electromagnetic actuators. Ingram showed an emotion for the first time since she became a cripple, and I went back to the glowing sea to find the biggest supply of mini-nukes the world had ever seen. The ghouls in the Sentinel site didn't put up much of a fight. The glowing one could have been a real nuisance, but I lured it into the command room, and Adam's Wrath handled it. And for the second time, I completely forgot about my ulterior motives for traveling to Sentinel site. It wasn't for the Brotherhood, it was to get more mini-nukes. As soon as I planted the beacon, I turned into an Xbox 360 because I turned around 360 degrees and walked away. Back at the airport, I activated Liberty Prime. Maxon took his now dry and crusty cream back inside himself when he yelled at me. I kept a close eye on Scribe Halen as we went down to the basement in the sky, and I traveled to Listing Post Bravo to kill me a metal puppet. The Protectrons were as stubborn as I am, because they rudely interrupted me telling Dance that I was going to bash in his skull. They're also a bit time consuming to kill. Dance got on his knees. I gave him the old heave-ho with my fat man, and I returned to Elder Maxon to inform him of a job well done. The end is almost in sight, but before the end can begin, I had to eliminate the railroad. Glory was the only one who posed an actual threat. In his final moments, Drummer Boy finally got to be a big boy. I beat him to death just as his father would have wanted. With the railroad decimated and Pam reprogrammed, Ingram and I could fly to Mass Fusion to get the beryllium agitator. The synths continued to be pretty annoying to fight. Luckily, you can largely ignore them as you get deeper and deeper into the building until you arrive at the reactor chamber. Once I had the agitator lodged safely inside me for transport, I knew that I'd be parting with at least 2 of my mini-nukes before I left the building. Sentry bots and assaultrons are among the toughest enemies in the game. Ingram did some damage to the sentry bot, but it was too much for her, which led to me using a mini-nuke on it. 2 assaultrons were released in the next room, and I didn't hesitate before ending them. I ignored the synths and Brotherhood soldiers fighting and causing a ruckus, left the building, and faced an almost 2-minute-long loading screen. Before I returned to Ingram and took the final steps towards the end of the world, I found the 3 mini-nukes located in the lower level of the Pridwin. I knew what was coming. about 15 minutes of boring while following Liberty Prime. For the briefest of moments, I thought it would be possible that I wouldn't have to consider doing shots of Drano during this part of the game, because I tried to jump on Liberty Prime's head to ride him all the way to the CIT ruins. Yeah, no, that doesn't work. After Liberty Prime got startled by the water, I figured out something that changes everything. You can just fast travel to CIT ruins and skip most of the bullshit. It's finally time to go beat my father to death. Hooray! Back in the Institute, I mostly ignored the synths until my team and I arrived at the heart of the Institute. I used one of my mini-nukes to take out a group of synths, another to take out what I thought was a legendary synth, but was actually a Brotherhood Knight. Oops. And went to find Father. His iron lung protected him from the harm I'd hoped to cause with a mini-nuke. And you can't melee while in dialogue, but you can look away, melee, and turn to face him before the animation finishes, allowing you to kill Father, who is surprisingly ripped for a 60-year-old. The Brotherhood and I pushed through the Institute until we found the final group of synths alive to make their stand. Well, they're not really alive. I ignored them, placed the charge on the reactor, was teleported to safety, tried to use my last mini-nuke on Jared Fogel's real doll, told Ingram to leave the kid to die in the explosion, was teleported to safety again. I destroyed the Institute and beat Fallout 4 with only a fat man. One of the biggest changes Fallout 4 made from previous Fallout games is that junk now has a purpose, besides being objects littering the wasteland, to make it feel like it was once a world people lived in. All junk items can be scrapped and used to make or modify weapons, armor, and settlements. But beyond crafting purposes, junk can also be used as a weapon. Can you beat Fallout 4 with only the junk jet? The junk jet is a heavy weapon in Fallout 4, which means all heavy weapon perks apply to it. There are 3 in total, but the most important is Heavy Gunner, which requires a 5 in strength. Mods are also gonna come in handy. To fully upgrade the junk jet, Gun Nut rank 3 and Science rank 1 are required. Both of those are conveniently intelligence perks, so we put 6 points into intelligence. It also lets us level up faster, so I dumped 2 more points into intelligence and spread out the remaining points. Nuclear war is scary. I couldn't bring myself to look. I just kept my eyes on Mr. Abel, and I knew everything would be okay. Everything was not okay. I got frozen, my wife got murdered, my son got kidnapped, and I went back under the ice before waking up sometime later. By now, escaping Vault 111 without attacking the red roaches is child's play. Lure them behind the door, seal it, then crouch until you're no longer in combat. Snag the Pip-Boy, and we're out of the vault without any bloodshed. Out into the wasteland, my first stop, as usual, was Sanctuary to briefly talk to Codsworth, put another special point into Endurance, pick up an assortment of items, and be off to the center of the map. I ignored Dogmeat, passed by the Museum of Freedom, handled a situation between Wolfgang and Trudy, and arrived at the Cambridge police station to assist Dance and the others with their ghoul problem by standing behind a fence and doing nothing. I'm working with the Brotherhood of Steel at the moment because there are only 2 ways to get a junk jet. You do the Brotherhood quest at ArcJet Systems and pick up the junk jet in the basement, or you kill Man-to-Man in a random encounter. There are 8 different kinds of random encounters. Man-to-Man's is a static encounter. There are locations all over the Commonwealth where these events can take place, but the locations are not specific. They occur in predetermined places. The locations are set, but the encounters are not, which means there's no way to know if a location's static encounter will be a mole rat ambush, or a duel between 2 Deathclaws, or a dead Vault 81 dweller, or an encounter with Man-to-Man. What this all means is that the only reliable way to get the junk jet is going to ArcJet with Dance. After looting the ghouls and the police station, Dance and I set off for ArcJet. Dance handled the synths inside without too much of a problem. We entered the engine core, I sprinted down the stairs, and finally found the junk jet. From what I've read online and what I experienced in-game, all items fired from the junk jet do the same amount of damage. It doesn't matter if you're firing a teddy bear at Mach 6 or lobbing a piece of steel towards an enemy at unimpressive speeds, the damage is the same. You might be thinking that I'd just load all my junk into the junk jet, but I didn't, because some components are rarer than others and are required to build the teleporter used to get into the Institute. I started off with 75 items in the junk jet, which isn't that bad. Once I'd used the thermal engine to try and kill Dance, we took the elevator, and I got into combat for the first time. The junk jet is sort of like the pistol from Doom 2016, because there's a standard shot and a charged shot. The standard is mostly worthless. The items don't go very far and do less damage. The charged shots do more damage and have a longer range. But the junk jet is not like your standard firearm. You're not breaking the sound barrier with a teddy bear. They're lobbed projectiles, which means you need to lead your opponent a little and consider that the object will drop as it flies through the air. It's not like Battlefield levels of bullet drop or anything, but it is something to be aware of. The other thing about the junk jet I found to be annoying is that when you aim in first person, there's no crosshair on the screen. This would be a slight inconvenience on its own, but when you add in the fact that the objects drop, it's a real pain in the ass. I tried to play in third-person mode while I cleared out the Museum of Freedom, but for whatever reason, I don't much care for it in Fallout. After speaking to Preston, I made my way to the roof, snagged myself a set of power armor, and ascended from the roof to the ground to take the fight to the Deathclaw. It was tough, as evidenced by the skull next to its name, but not impossible to take down. I had 83 ammo when I jumped from the roof, and after everything was dead, I had used almost 30 pieces of junk. When you think about it, that's not all that bad. I mean, I killed a bunch of raiders and a Deathclaw at level 5 with less than 30 shots. With the area safe, I ransacked a few buildings, sent the Minutemen off to Sanctuary, and returned to Sanctuary to upgrade my junk jet with a gunner sight and long barrel. I also dropped off a few pieces of junk, duct tape, biometric scanners, those sorts of things, for safekeeping, and began heading towards Diamond City to get started on the main questline. I stopped by the wreck of the USS Riptide to test out my new and improved junk jet. The gunner sights make a huge difference. I also briefly experienced something strange that would piss me off a lot throughout this run. See, the junk jet is a finicky piece of shit. There are a myriad of things that can go wrong with it. In this instance, sometimes fired projectiles simply don't connect. You're aiming at an enemy, you fire at them, and you miss. I kept that in me noodle and proceeded to Diamond City, where I ignored Piper and McDonough, entered the city, and sold most of my ammo to Mira to stock up on stim packs and buy the cheapest junk she had to up my ammo count. I then met with Ellie and got word from her that Nick Valentine was being held hostage somewhere in an underground bunker. Before I ventured into Park Street Station, I went back to Sanctuary to begin crafting ammo. That's right, you can craft junk jet ammo. Take all the junk you've found, drop it on the ground, scrap it all, and you've turned individual pieces of junk into their base components, which are also pieces of junk. For example, you can fire a gas canister as a single object, or you can break it down into 3 steel and 1 oil. So now you've effectively turned 1 ammo into 4 ammo. Prior to dropping all my junk, I had 154 pieces of junk loaded into the junk jet. After scrapping everything and storing some items, I had over 700 pieces of ammo loaded into the junk jet. This is where the junk jet gets its effectiveness. Your ammo is effectively infinite. Even if you run out, all you have to do is spend a few minutes looting, break down what you found, and you've replenished your ammo supply without spending any caps. With my damn near unlimited ammo, I returned to Diamond City, left the city immediately, and began making my way towards Park Street Station. Because I didn't have to worry about running out of ammo, I wasted a few raiders on my way to the station, passed through a building, and found a cult. This highlights another advantage the junk jet has. You don't have to worry about reloading. You can just keep firing and firing and firing away until everything is dead. I then arrived at Park Street Station, went inside, and took the fight to the Triggermen. They're not that tough to kill given their lack of armor, but when attacking in mass with automatic weapons, they can drain your health quicker than you'd expect. Still, most can go down in 1 or 2 shots. Inside the vault, I blasted a Triggerman into next week, passed through a construction area, and killed Dino with a piece of steel to the knee, and met up with Nick Valentine. This was actually a nice change of pace, as I usually let Nick do most of the work as we escape the vault because I'm near worthless in a fight, but this time I could actually lead the charge. We got through the Triggermen and came face to face with Skinny Malone and his crew. Because I'm a god of hoarding, Skinny Malone never stood a chance against me. After we escaped, I told Nick I'd meet him back at Diamond City later. I returned to Sanctuary to scrap more junk, and even a few firearms for my arsenal. I was back up to over 700 pieces of junk and was finally ready to do Piper's interview. I sort of blacked out and just spammed the 4 key over and over until Piper stopped talking. I assumed it was a raging success and went to tell Nick everything I knew about my situation. He led me to Kellogg's house and failed to get in even though he's half man and half lock. I strapped my helmet on tight and used my charm and quick wit to convince Geneva to give me a key to Kellogg's house. There was nothing all that interesting inside, aside from more junk to add to my collection. Nick whistled for dog meat from inside Kellogg's house. I'm not sure how the hell dog meat heard that from Red Rocket, but he did. Nick and I went on endless adventures, and after 3 seconds I told him to fuck off to Sanctuary. After so many runs in Fallout 4, I know exactly which side of the map Fort Hagen is on, so I set a marker, fast traveled back to Arcjet as it's the closest to the marker, and began my journey. I killed a few ghouls on the way out there, found a suit of power armor in a dilapidated mobile home, and arrived at Fort Hagen. Dog meat wasn't there yet, but all I had to do was sleep in a bed, fast travel to Fort Hagen, and he's not there. I know what the problem is. You're supposed to show dog meat the nothing before you can leave Diamond City for Fort Hagen. Now he's there, and I can tell him to leave before I start shooting him with plastic. After taking out the turrets on the roof, I entered the fort. That projectiles don't hit shit problem reared its ugly head again here. This issue isn't listed in the bug section on the Junk Jets page on the Fallout Wiki, so I'm not exactly sure what it is that's causing it. The synths here aren't much tougher than those I faced at Arcjet. Plain Jane synths can go down in 2 shots. Aragorns take 3 or 4, depending on how charged your shot is. Not particularly difficult. Turrets are a completely different beast though. Those automated shits are somewhat immune to the Junk Jet. And by immune, I mean half the time you can't damage them. It's not like it's just one turret that's glitching or something. 2 turrets, back to back, had this problem, as did many more. I assumed it was me somehow fucking up, because Bethesda games are notoriously bug-free. Not long after the turret fiasco, I came face to face with Kellogg. My tactic for dealing with Kellogg was the same as it always has been: drugs. Psycho and a sneak attack does significant damage to him, the few synths in the room aren't a threat, and the hardest part became hitting an invisible target. I stripped him naked, left his corpse to rot, watched the Pridwin arrive, returned to Diamond City, sold a few things to Arturo, got through the conversation with Nick and Piper as fast as I could, and was off to Goodneighbor to enter Kellogg's memories. I killed Finn before he had a chance to rob me, met Dr. Amari, tried to fry Nick's brain, failed, took a seat, and went through Kellogg's memories. This time, I changed things up a bit. Instead of leaving the room to get something to eat while I was in Kellogg's brain, I left after I exited the Tranquility Lounger. After speaking to Amari again, I was ready to head towards the glowing sea. Some of you have asked how I get Fallout 3, 4, and New Vegas to run without crashing. The answer is simple: I don't. In fact, Fallout 4 crashes damn near every time I launch it after starting a new recording, and I haven't been able to press load on Fallout 3's main menu without the game crashing since last year. So, if you're gonna ask a similar question in the comments of this video, don't waste your time because I don't have an answer. Anyway, before I went to the glowing sea, I stopped by Sanctuary again to drop off some junk. Unfortunately, the closest location I've discovered to the glowing sea is Fort Hagen. I found a new suit of power armor in a garage and made a mental note to come back for it later. He never went back for it. I faced a few ghouls closer to the Green Sea. Roamers take 2 shots, but normal ghouls can go down in 1 hit. Then I faced a raider survivalist, which was surprisingly harder to kill than Kellogg was. After entering the glowing sea, I mostly ignored the nonsense until I arrived at the Crater of Adam. I slipped off a rock and startled someone, which led to everyone opening fire on me. This ended up being a good thing though. I had no idea these cultists actually had names. If nothing else, I learned something today. At Virgil's cave, I convinced him to help me, and then fast traveled back to civilization to head towards Green Tech Genetics to track down a courser. The projectile problem happened again here, and I still have no idea what the hell causes it to happen, but every time it does, I get 1 step closer to doing shots of bleach. The gunners inside Green Tech weren't too bad. The low-level gunners, without a prefix or suffix, can usually be rendered dead with 2 shots. The biggest problem when dealing with the courser was the amount of time it takes to charge a shot. Z247's got a few stim packs, which heal most of the damage done to him in the time it takes to charge up another shot. With a bit of persistence, I killed the courser and the hostages, went back to Goodneighbor, where I spent more time in loading screens than I did anything else, and ignored the Freedom Trail until I discovered the railroad. I put on my best dress and distracted Desdemona with my ample curves and bright blue helmet, allowing me to unofficially become an official member of the railroad. I handed over the chip, Tinkerbell decoded it, and I couldn't continue the railroad story until a glorified fetch quest with Deacon was completed first. I'll go ahead and tell you now that this was a waste of time, but in the moment, I had no idea how many minutes I'd spend that I would never be able to get back. I met up with Deacon somewhere in the Commonwealth and we pushed through the switchboard until I recovered Bitch Doctor's prototype. Nothing inside posed any sort of a threat, which is why I'm glossing over it. I declined the gun from Deacon, but he gave it to me anyway. Gotta love the illusion of choice in Fallout 4. After returning the doctor's toy, I went to Bunker Hill to meet Old Man Stockton. I turned a super mutant into paste with a piece of steel to the back, cleared out a church, played Ring Around a Rosie with a super mutant suicider, and escorted Hightower and his special friend back to his apartment so he can wipe his mind. Fallout 4 crashed twice when I tried to launch it again. I had to wait for Desi to explain to the underground simpletons what a blimp is, gave Virgil's plans to Tom, and can finally begin making the preparations to prepare to fax myself into the Institute. At the build site, I found another junk jet problem. For reasons only known to Todd Howard, the junk jet doesn't seem to work from behind cover. Even when I'm on the precipice of several broken bones, the junk gets caught on the floor. Again, no idea why this happens. Once everything was dead, I could scrap some of the construction in the area, lay down the reflector platform, and get the remaining plans from Tom. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Everything in my entire life for the last few hours has led to this. I took everything worth a damn from my junk drawer in Sanctuary, threw it on the ground, scrapped it all at speeds that would make last month's me jealous, realized that I effectively now had infinite ammo, and created the Institute Transponder Teleportation Transponder. I wanted to corrupt the Institute from within by dragging a body inside with me, but the fallen man's friend wasn't having that. His bullets fucked everything up because the body didn't teleport inside with me. I decided to do something a bit different this time around. Sometimes I kill everyone in the Institute. Other times I work with the Institute. This time, I opted for the diplomatic approach. I politely told Father that I wasn't interested in working with him, and left without killing anyone. Desdemona was shockingly okay with my fuck-up. Then I realized how monumental my fuck-up really was. I had to talk to Preston. Remember what I said about wasting time with the railroad a few minutes ago? This is that. The railroad are now more or less out of the equation. I decided long ago that I wasn't working with the Brotherhood. I already told off Father, so the Institute's not an option, and the railroad has helped me as much as they can. I'm now forced to work with the Minutemen. This means that the next few minutes are going to be filled with boring explanations about how I helped a settlement with the raider problem, or the ghouls across the map that are somehow giving them trouble, or whatever else it was that I did. The Form Ranks quest is probably the worst quest in the game. You have to help 8 settlements in order to complete it. After giving Sturgis the holotape I'd gotten from an Institute terminal, I could get to work on the settlements that needed my help. I'm not going to go over all these. I spent about 2 hours doing all these, and to be perfectly honest, nothing all that interesting happened. The only noteworthy quest was the one that had me traveling to Sagus Ironworks to retrieve a ceremonial sword. And this was only noteworthy because Slag was a tough motherfucker to deal with. I also spent a little while playing with liquid magma. After a few settlements were helped, it was time to take back the castle. Killing all the little snail people was a pain in the ass just because there were so many of them. The giant one was tough as well, but not as tough as Slag. I helped a few more settlements, got word that an old cunt was waiting for me at the castle, I set up the artillery, wasted all the smoke grenades on the ocean, and the Institute attacked. This was bad. The higher level synths weren't the worst, but what turned this into a massacre were the coursers. It didn't help that all the Minutemen were pussies and a lot of them died. It wasn't long before I ran out of stim packs and retreated inside the castle walls. The castle was 70% defended, but the last 30% was much harder than the first 70%. It's worth mentioning that by this point, I'd upgraded my junk jet to almost its max potential. The only upgrade I didn't have was the ignition module that does 17 fire damage, compared to the electric module's 15 shock damage. The problem was that coursers do more damage to me than I can do to them, and there are several and a few synth patrollers. Eventually, I ran for the hills and tried to seek shelter in the water to let Preston get fucked to death over and over and over again by the metal men, but that didn't work all that well either. The other problem was that some of the coursers do flame damage to me, which greatly inhibits my ability to see where the fuck I'm shooting. After a while, I resorted to drinking irradiated seawater just to keep myself alive. The last few coursers ran for their non-existent lives, and I went after them because I wasn't letting them get away. One got away. I'd started this war with almost 780 ammo, and by the time the battle was over, I was down to 500 pieces of junk. But all that litter was worth it, because the end is in sight. Sturgis gave me the rundown on what I'd need to do. I visited several locations to stock up on stim packs, loaded my junk jet with everything I had, and swam through the sewers until I entered the Institute for the second and last time. Preston and friends arrived, he gave me the bomb, and we began pushing through the Institute, slaughtering all in our way. Not even the mega monkeys stood a chance against me and my glorified slingshot. In a poetic twist, I found Father lying in a bed when I had 666 pieces of junk. It couldn't have been any more perfect unless I got to sit there and watch him slowly die and eventually beg for death. But we don't have that kind of time. With the evacuation order issued, I killed the remaining synths and scientists on the way to the reactor core. I placed the charge, and Sturgis teleported us to the relay room to make sure everyone was ready. I got carried away and accidentally told the kid he could come with us. I could have just reloaded a save and told him to piss off, but I had something much more time-consuming in mind. I stood there for 5 minutes, blasting that little shit with every piece of junk I had, just to make sure he knew that he was neither loved nor wanted. I took a look at all the shit I'd fired through the kid, took a single piece of steel with me, detonated the explosive, and as the mushroom cloud erupted from underground, I fired a piece of steel at Preston Garvey's stupid head and beat Fallout 4 with only a junk jet.
I want the tapes! I want the tapes now! And we are back with Warren G.
Fallout 4's weapon customization system blows every other Fallout game out of the water. But just like with Fallout 3 and New Vegas, there are ways to defeat foes without using guns, explosives, or melee weapons. Can you beat Fallout 4 with only the Pain Train perk? Pain Train is a perk in Fallout 4 that lets you damage enemies when you sprint into them while wearing power armor. Because it essentially turns power armor into a living, breathing weapon, it requires strength of 10. The kind of person who dreams about being a train pays no mind to intelligence, but does put enough points into luck to get the Idiot Savant perk, which has been mathematically proven to be a superior method of gaining experience compared to maxing out intelligence. Endurance is useful to take damage. Agility is necessary because sprinting drains your action points, which are influenced by your agility, and Charisma to get a slight discount on stim packs from vendors. With my body almost more than ready, my husband and I ran to the vault. I did a sweet 360 as I got into the circle on the center. We went under the ice. I discovered that you could pound on the glass when you wake up to watch your child get abducted by a sentient cereal box, and then I woke up. Escaping Vault 101 while not attacking any of the rad roaches is beyond trivial at this point. I escaped the vault, arrived at Sanctuary, got some delicious experience from Codsworth, used the Your Special book to bump my strength up to 10 so that I'd be able to get the Pain Train perk when I leveled up, and began ransacking every single house I could find for garbage while Codsworth got to work on our little bug problem. I have no idea how he managed to stay alive for the last 200 years, because he can levitate off the ground and yet somehow he got himself stuck on a barrel. Or maybe he was just really into bloatfly stings. He even said he doesn't feel pain, so it's probably that. I had things to do, so I fast traveled to Sanctuary from Sanctuary. Codsworth had taken care of that bug, and I went to town, scrapping every object in every house and all the land within this stupid little green boundary. I quite literally spent 10 minutes disposing of Sanctuary's trash. I built a few boxes to store my valuables and was off to the Museum of Freedom, because that's the closest set of power armor. It took a few tries to get up on the roof, but I succeeded in getting a suit of powered armor. I let Preston take care of the raiders outside the museum's entrance. I leveled up, put the point into Pain Train, and went inside the museum to demolish everyone I could find. That's almost true. I went inside without the armor to snag a fusion core, then left the building and got back in my power armor to begin riding circles around all my enemies. You know what? Pain Train does far more damage than I thought it would, by a lot. All it takes is one hydraulics-powered forearm to the chest and a raider dies. One hit, who'd have thought? With all the raiders knocked unconscious, they're not dead, this is a children's game, I met Preston and his gaggle of idiots, went up to the roof, dropped to the ground like an angel of death, and turned the raiders into train tracks. And just like with one of my previous Fallout 4 videos, the only remaining problem here was the Deathclaw. Pain Train does a traumatizing amount of damage to most low-level foes, but a Deathclaw is not that. So I did the only thing I could think of that wouldn't involve my power armor or the person inside getting torn to shreds. The Deathclaw can't get inside this little building here, and it's right in Preston's line of sight. All it takes is about 10 minutes of baiting the Deathclaw to stay near the building so Preston can attack it, and its health will be low enough that you can try to run into it, almost get your head ripped off, slam into it right as Preston lands the killing blow, so you reload a save because Preston doesn't get to say that he killed the Deathclaw. The remaining Minuteman is now on his way to Sanctuary, as am I because I have things to do, mainly leveling up to get the Idiot Savant perk. Once I'd gotten it, Sturgis tasked me with making a few beds. I went a little overboard, but in my madness, I came up with something brilliant. Something that would have blown my mind if I understood the implications of what I just decided to do. I gathered a lot of wood when I was destroying Sanctuary. 807 pieces of wood, to be exact. That amount of wood can make 403 fence posts. Each one gives you 2 experience, but thanks to the Idiot Savant perk, you occasionally get 6 experience per fence post. Can you see where I'm going with this? You might be asking yourself, did this idiot really lay down 400 fence posts? Of course I did. What kind of person do you think I am? It was so successful that it leveled me up twice. But the perk noise kept going long after I stopped building, and let me tell you, that got old fast. But I wasn't done there, not by a long shot. All around Sanctuary are trees that give 12 to 20 pieces of wood each, and with a smile on my face, I ripped all those fuckers out of the earth to use to fulfill my twisted fantasy of a world that is only fence posts. This isn't Construction Adventures with Mitten Squad, so I won't spend too much more time on it, but with all the wood I gathered, I was able to put down 826 more fence posts, to bring us up to a grand total of 1,229 fence posts. It truly is a sight to behold. With my ideas realized, I began heading south to make my way towards Diamond City. My initial plan was to stock up on stim packs at Diamond City and continue south until I got to the castle, because there are quite a few fusion cores stockpiled in the armory. I'm getting ahead of myself. I turned the raiders, hassling Trudy into slime on the ground, sold and bought with Trudy, and kept moving until I found myself in the middle of a mole rat family reunion. A small problem with the Pain Train perk is that you do need to get a bit of a running start, which becomes a problem when the enemy is always gnawing on your shoelaces. After that situation was resolved, my fusion core was running on fumes. There was no way I'd be able to get to another fusion core before it crapped out on me. So I ditched the armor for the time being and traveled on foot. I can't attack anything on the road, but slight inconveniences that I've dealt with a few times but still are kind of annoying is my middle name. Sometime later, I attempted to help Paladin Dance with his ghoul problem. They followed me into an alley and beat me up. Dance lost consciousness enough times that he probably had significant brain injuries, and I followed him to Arctret Systems because there's a fusion core in the reactor area. He did all the work on the way there, and bravely fought off some of his brothers and sisters until we got into the basement where I got my hands on another fusion core. I still couldn't fight back because of the implication, so Dance picked up the slack. I might have accidentally lit him on fire a little bit. I gave him his toy since he was so well behaved. I agreed to join his club, and I was back on the road. You might think that because I had a fusion core, I'd return to my armor. You would be metaphorically incorrect. My goal was still Diamond City. Along the way, I rescued a shopping cart from drowning and returned it to its family and, that's about it. I didn't bother with the mayor or anyone else when I got to Diamond City. I went straight for the vendors. Arturo had an impressive 4 fusion cores, and with enough batteries to last almost 90 minutes, I reunited with my power armor, tried to stop a murder but stood in front of the wrong person, did the interview with Piper, had a pessimistic attitude about everything, got word from Ellie about her robotic friend, and was off to continue my campaign of idiocy. I used my powers as the living embodiment of Aqualad to repair some pipes and squash a few mirelurks. Met up with the settlers at Ten Pines Bluffs, kept my ulterior motives a secret, stole their tomatoes, and took on the raiders at Corvega Assembly Plant. These are still mostly low-level raiders, so despite there being a lot of them, they can be taken down with relative ease. It did take me a little while to figure out where the head goon was hiding out, but once I did, I turned his legs into silly putty, informed the nobodies of my successful rampage, and got to work scrapping every piece of wood they had, which was a disappointingly low amount. Any is better than none, but it wasn't worth the time I'd just spent at Corvega. In fact, I was only able to build another 120 fence posts with my recovered materials. I then talked to Preston about joining the Minutemen, just to let him feel excited for a little bit. Like when you ask your parents if you can go to Toys R Us this weekend, and they say maybe, when they really have no intentions of taking you to Toys R Us. I finished up the Sanctuary quest for Sturgis, was now level 15, and began heading to Park Street Station to save Nick. After getting into a scuffle with a few raiders, I bumped the difficulty up to normal, because killing almost everything with one hit felt too easy. I antagonized Swan, found out that his arm is a boat and not a mutated tentacle, which blew my mind, entered the station, and introduced my body to the triggermen. It was here things got annoying. There were a few issues with the Pain Drain perk that I didn't realize until now. The first is that just like with a melee attack, sometimes the full speed of a body slam does nothing, probably because they can block it. The other problem is one I've already mentioned. You need a bit of a running start, which is a real pain to deal with. Also, by this point, the armor on my power armor had long since been destroyed, so I'm essentially just a giant shell. I took on the remaining triggermen, loitering around the vault entrance, fought a few inside, but largely ignored them because they weren't worth all the effort. Another problem I didn't mention was that sometimes you sprint into an enemy, you'll hear the sound effect, but nothing will happen. They'll just take no damage. That happened with Dino a few times, but I managed to save Nick and we began making our way out of the vault. It took a few attempts to convince Darla to leave Skinny Malone, allowing Nick and I to leave the vault for good and agree to meet back up at Diamond City to discuss my kidnapped offspring. He suggested searching Kellogg's house, so I smooth-talked Geneva to get a key to Kellogg's house, found his special room, met Dogmeat, and the two of us set off into the wasteland to track down Kellogg. For once, rather than fast-traveling directly to Fort Hagen, I followed Dogmeat around as we searched for clues. We had so much fun together. We ran along the train tracks. We killed things. Then we killed more things. Dogmeat killed one of his cousins. He got overzealous and decided we should take on a Yao Guai, which was going pretty well until Preston showed up and saved the day. This guy was a phony, so I told him off and watched him vanish into the fog, never to be seen again. A few minutes later, we arrived at Fort Hagen, and I dismissed Dogmeat because I had to do this alone. I knew that what was inside Fort Hagen would be tough, so I postponed the search for my son for a bit to journey north where a set of power armor is supposedly located. Surprisingly, this attack dog was the toughest thing I've fought so far. You wouldn't expect something with a handle to put up much of a fight, but this thing sure did. It wasn't long before my life became a Disney movie. In a beautiful forest, surrounded by friendly deer, was my exoskeleton in shining armor. I ditched my old armor because I wouldn't be needing it, returned to Fort Hagen, and took shelter inside the base because a green sky is usually a sign that a tornado's coming. The synths inside were not at all fun to deal with. Even the base synths took 3 hits to kill. The small upside is that when they're in a group, I can ram into all of them and do damage to the entire group, provided I actually hit them all. I didn't really need the experience, and fighting all the synths on the way to Kellogg would most likely destroy the armor I'd just gotten. So I ignored most of the synths until I was ready to face Kellogg. Here's a fun fact: you can't pain train someone if they're not an enemy. You can't immediately start the fight because Kellogg isn't initially hostile. It's not really an issue because sneak attacks are impossible, but it is yet another problem. I took some Med-X and Psycho to prepare myself for the battle, and when it began, I was more than prepared. I did more damage to Kellogg with my first few attacks than I thought I would, but his synths proved to be the real annoyance, constantly attacking me and getting in my way, allowing Kellogg a chance to use a stim pack. Also, the fact that I had to wait for my AP to regenerate in order to sprint and attack him wasn't doing me any favors. It took longer than it usually does, but Kellogg eventually fell before me. I cleared out the remaining synths in the room, ransacked his brain, watched the Brotherhood of Steel's blimp arrive, went back to Diamond City, sold a bunch of stuff to Arturo, and talked to Nick and Piper about what to do next. We all agreed that the best course of action was to head to Goodneighbor. Dr. Amari agreed to do what she could with Kellogg's memories. I took a seat, relived a few memories, talked to Amari about some guy named Virgil. She told me he was out in the Glowing Sea, and I was on my way. The Glowing Sea is a lengthy jog away from anywhere I've ever been so far. It's far enough south that deathclaws are common. Luckily, they're incredibly stupid and can be avoided as long as there's a tree nearby. After taking far more radiation damage than I was comfortable with, I arrived at Virgil's cave, got a rundown on the plan, and left to find a courser. My first stop was CIT Ruins, where you're supposed to listen to a radio signal and follow the beeps. Not gonna do that because that's boring. Instead, I went straight for Green Tech Genetics. The gunners inside were tough, could take a healthy amount of damage, and were perfectly happy dishing it out as well. The good news is that this building is mostly long corridors, making it easy, though still time-consuming, to take down them all. The only real trouble spot came from dealing with this guy with the missile launcher. Without the protection of actual armor, it does a lot of damage, but that only made it more satisfying when I charged into a group of 3 people and killed them all at the same time. Then came the courser fight. Sneak attacks are usually my go-to method here, but they can't be used. Med-X and Psycho can though. The Pain Train actually does a decent amount of damage. The biggest issue was his many stealth boys, which made hitting him a bit difficult. I pretty much turned myself into a boss fight by using the same tactic over and over again. Charge at him, retreat away from him to gain momentum, then attack him again. My tactic worked rather well. I got the crisp from his head, talked to Amari again, followed the Freedom Trail, solved their stupid puzzle, met Desdemona and her lackeys, and had the chip analyzed by Tinkerbell. I then left the church, returned to Virgil out in the glowing sea, got the teleporter plans from him, and had to decide which group to work with. My first thought was to side with the railroad. My only method of attack is the pain train. I named myself Thomas, after the tank engine. They seemed like the logical choice, which is why I had Sturgis analyze the plans. After I built the initial platform, I got the remaining plans from Sturgis, put the entire thing together in record time, and was finally ready to take the next step. Everything I've done has been leading up to this. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Bedworld. I would have made more, but I ran out of materials. Then I tried to make the steel chair exhibit, but I reached the build limit. I was still more than satisfied with my work, so I stood near the platform, got teleported into the Institute, did the holotape thing for Sturgis, met Father, agreed to work with him, met the various Institute leaders, and got my first mission from Father. I returned to Sanctuary and saw that the steel chair exhibit was a raging success. I gave Sturgis his tape, fast traveled to the Old North Church, and began making my way to Libertalia. I interrupted a robot race and no one was happy about it. I retreated into the water, but they were relentless with their onslaught. Once I was free, I met the Courser. He gave me the synth recall code. I tested the construction of a few wooden walkways, and quick-saved at the worst possible time. I don't think I've ever gotten a more horribly timed quick-save than this one. I quite literally had no choice but to reload another save and try again. The second time worked out much better. I made my way up to the Raiders' hideout, used the recall code, cleared out the other Raiders, and told Father that I'd done it good. He showed me how much he loved me by sending me off to war. The Battle of Bunker Hill. Not that tough, to be honest. I attacked some of the railroad heavies outside the gate and let the synths do most of the work to finish them off. The Battle of the Basement was much more gruesome. I found a legendary weapon and thought that a legendary item only playthrough might be interesting to try. Got some armor from a dead Brotherhood of Steel Knight, listened to how scared the synths were, used the recall code on them all, and almost railroaded my father into an early grave. I say almost because I couldn't have attacked him there even if I wanted to. He was less than impressed with the world around him, as most evil geniuses are. He told me to attend the directorate meeting. I tried to sit in his chair, but that's his spot, and he informed us all that he is officially dying. He named me the new director of the Institute. I dubbed myself King Choo Choo, and was ready to retrieve the Barnacle Aggravator from Mass Fusion. But I knew what was coming. I'd become enemies with the Brotherhood of Steel by teleporting to Mass Fusion. It was nerf or nothing, so I returned to Paladin Dance after keeping him waiting for several days. We rode up to the Pridwin, and I got started. If you pickpocket a fusion core from a knight without getting detected, they leave their armor. If you're still hidden, you can take all the pieces from their armor for yourself, which is what I did. But wait, there's more. I dropped that set of armor off at Sanctuary, listened to Elder Maxon give his speech, introduced myself to the cast and crew of the Pridwin, and abused the VAT system to get inside Tegan's armory and steal an assortment of items, the most important of which were 4 fusion cores. Then I sold most of what I'd stolen to buy 6 more fusion cores, only 4 of which were at 100% charge, and began stealing the armor pieces from various sets of power armor that nobody was using. I had 16 fusion cores, 3 backup armor pieces for every limb, and having just performed the heist of the hour, I returned to the Institute to relay to Mass Fusion to find the beryllium agitator. The scribes and initiates are all a joke. The knights are tougher, but they're definitely worth killing as they have armor pieces and a fusion core. I used Allie Fillmore as a human shield. The elevator failed, I fixed it, went down to the reactor room, snagged the agitator, and things got bad. To escape with the agitator, you must defeat a sentry bot and 2 assaultrons. The sentry bot was worse, by a lot. It's quick, can stagger you with its karate skills, and has a ridiculous amount of health. I used the same tactic with it and the assaultrons as I did with the Courser and Kellogg. Attack, retreat, attack again. With the day 1 in the name of science, I gave the agitator to Allie back at the Institute, interrupted Father's medical evaluation, and went to a Grey Garden house to solve a little problem. The gunners outside never stood a chance. I convinced T.S. Wallace to join the Institute, recorded a message for the Commonwealth, played with the dials and buttons in the Diamond City radio room, installed the reactor, activated it, and attended my first directorate meeting as the Big Train. Father then informed me that the railroad would need to be wiped off the map. For a moment I was confused, dumbfounded even. I told Desdemona that I'd been working with the Institute. She told me to leave and never come back, but nobody would attack me. Then I stole an alarm clock, and as the bullets started flying, I knew everything was going to be alright. Most of them were easy to send to the afterlife. They could take a few hits, but nothing crazy. Glory was the exception, probably. I think being shot by a minigun can slow you down and prevent you from sprinting. Either that, or I'm stupid. It could honestly be either. Soon enough, Pam was all that remained of the railroad. I sent her offline with a forearm to the chest, looked at the mess I'd made, looked at the mess Glory'd made, left the railroad forever, and informed Father that the railroad would no more. He told me to let Dr. Lee know that it was time to destroy the Brotherhood of Steel. I momentarily saw what God sees and relayed to the airport. As you'd expect, the Boston airport is incredibly fortified with multiple knights in power armor, multiple turrets, and lower-level peasants all over the place. Despite my power armor and the numerous points in damage-resistant perks, they managed to end me. The next time, I ate my one emergency carrot and used the same tactic I've used several times. Then I died again. I wasn't doing this a third time, so I used one of my stealth boys and snuck into the garage. Took out the few unarmored foes who were foolish enough to stand in my way, and before long, I'd reached an impasse. A situation that made this playthrough come to a grinding halt. You can't pain train these generators to destroy them. I tried jumping off the world's strongest lamp to land on the ground next to it since that does some damage, but it did nothing. I cannot destroy these generators using only power armor. I did think of something though. The point is to beat the game only using the Pain Train perk to kill enemies. You don't get experience for destroying generators. They don't count as enemies. So I pulled out my fists, destroyed the first, then the second, then the third generator, and the Brotherhood of Steel prepared to make their final stand against the might of the Institute. I had to fend off everything that remained of the Commonwealth chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel, while an Institute virus infected Liberty Prime. For a moment, I thought to be a little punk bitch and leave my power armor blocking the staircase, then leave to fast travel back to Sanctuary to get my other set and use it to block the only other staircase up to Liberty Prime. This synth proved that it would be a viable option. I didn't do it though, because I was doing more than enough damage to everything in my path. Even Paladin Dance didn't stand much of a chance. It wasn't long before Elder Maxon arrived to do his part. I got a few hits on him, but I kept falling off the railing. I wasn't there in his final moments to hold his hand as he passed on, but I was more than willing to raid his corpse and dress myself in his armor. The virus synth finished just as the combat guerrillas started arriving, and I was teleported to safety to watch the Pridwin go down in flames. I then returned to the Institute, spoke to Father one last time, and beat Fallout 4 by only using the Pain Train perk.